$7 billion. That is the market value of the liquid sitting right now in your kitchen cabinet. But in 1848, it wasn't just a drink. It was the most heavily guarded national secret on the planet. An absolute monopoly. A stranglehold on the throat of the British Empire. Look at this room, London, a fog so thick it veils the crimes being plotted inside elite gentlemen's clubs. In the mirror, a man is trembling, Robert Fortune. He doesn't fear death, he fears failure. He is staining his skin with yellow pigment. He is attaching a fake braid to a shaved head. These oversized Mandarin robes hide the nerves of a Scotsman. Xinhua, that's the name he's chosen. A false identity for the greatest theft of intellectual property in human history. We are often told the British built the world with laws and free trade, ridiculous fairy tales for the naive. The naked truth is far more brutal. They built their glory on a stolen sprout and an ocean of opium. Because, in the game of empires, you don't buy a monopoly, you steal it. The Great Tea Robbery, the corporate espionage that reshaped the world. And here is where the truth becomes difficult to swallow. London in the 1840s wasn't just a city, it was an addict. An addict in a tailcoat, sipping tea from bone china. But make no mistake, this wasn't some refined habit. This was an economic catastrophe. Tea taxes accounted for 10% of the entire British Crown's revenue. You heard that right. 10% of the world's most powerful empire's treasury depended on a dried leaf from a distant land they couldn't control. The Qing dynasty, an aging empire, yet one that held the master key to Western financial stability. The problem? The Chinese didn't need you. They didn't want Manchester textiles. They didn't want Birmingham machines. They looked upon the outside world as barbarians, and they accepted only one thing in exchange for tea: silver. Pure, cold silver. Glistening bullion flowed from London to Canton and never returned. Every year, 28 million pounds of silver vanished into this oriental black hole. Britain was hemorrhaging currency. Their balance of trade was in ruins. And when an empire is backed into a corner, they don't play by the rules. They turn to the East India Company. Don't call them a business. They were a leviathan, a corporate monster with its own army, the power to declare war, and its own set of laws. When the silver ran dry, they committed one of history's most ruthless acts. They flooded China with opium. They traded white death for green tea leaves, a cycle of blood and silver. But opium was only a temporary painkiller. It fueled wars, it bred hatred, but it didn't solve the root of the problem. To break the Chinese monopoly forever, they needed something more permanent. They needed to control the tea plant itself. They needed to turn India, their own colony, into a massive tea factory. But there was a barrier. The Chinese guarded their tea secrets like a national treasure. Anyone caught smuggling plants or seeds out of the country faced the most agonizing of deaths. They needed a desperate man. Someone smart enough not to get caught, and cold-blooded enough to betray a civilization. September 1848. Robert Fortune sets foot into the forbidden heart of inner China. He isn't an explorer, he is a professional trespasser, a wolf in scholar's clothing. Imagine the stifling, humid heat of Fujian, the pungent scent of damp earth, and the low, guarded whispers of local farmers on the steep terraced hills. Fortune has to hold his breath, clenching his fists every time he passes an imperial checkpoint. One mispronounced syllable, one unconvincing gesture, or a single curious glance at things not meant for foreign eyes, and his head would be mounted on a city gate as a bloody warning to all. Why take such a suicidal risk? Because, at the time, the entire Western world was being played for fools. For 200 years, British merchants genuinely believed that green tea and black tea came from two entirely different species of plants. This was a psychological and marketing masterstroke by the Chinese tea guilds. They wove myths of mystical groves, guarded by mountain spirits, to ensure the West believed the secret of black tea was a biological miracle that could never be replicated. But Fortune, with the cold, calculating eye of an industrial spy, dismantled the lie. It wasn't about the plant, it was about the process. He realized that green and black tea were effectively half-brothers. The difference lay in the manual kneading of the leaves, the precise resting periods in the shade, and, most crucially, the chemical magic of oxidation. Fortune was silently downloading the source code of a billion-dollar industry. He recorded everything in a notebook, hidden deep within his oversized Mandarin robes, the exact kiln temperatures, the fermentation timings, and the way charcoal glowed beneath massive cast-iron pans. Every line he scratched into that book was a dagger, aimed at the heart of the Qing monopoly. And then there was the hardware. How do you keep thousands of fragile saplings alive across tens of thousands of miles of salt spray and violent Indian Ocean storms? The answer lay in Wardian cases. Don't look at them as mere glass boxes. They were the high-tech shipping containers of the 19th century. A closed ecological system that allowed tea plants to self-sustain water and air for months at sea. Fortune packed 13,000 saplings and tens of thousands of seeds into these glass cocoons. A massive biological treasure was being smuggled across the border under the silent threat of British cannons. But plants cannot talk. Fortune knew that without operators, these plants would be nothing more than expensive firewood once they reached India. So, he did something even more calculated, striking at the very soul of the craft. He bought out their loyalty. 8 of the finest tea masters from the Chinese plantations were targeted. These men held centuries of ancestral secrets in their calloused hands and sharp minds. Fortune used East India Company silver to paint a vision of wealth and a new life in India. He used money to sever their roots, turning them into accomplices for the very enemy that was ravaging their homeland with opium. By the way, if you want to understand how modern empires use capital and influence to buy loyalty and shift today's global cash flow, hit subscribe. We're here to decode the ledgers the world would rather keep hidden. These 8 men boarded the ship, carrying the national security of the Qing dynasty to serve the British crown. The biological monopoly that had lasted 2,000 years was officially dismantled from the inside. Fortune didn't just take seeds. He was shipping the soul of an empire across the border. It was a systematic betrayal, an IP theft executed without a single byte of data, using nothing but glass boxes, silver coins, and hollow promises. Robert Fortune returned a hero. In the history books, he is celebrated as a great botanist, the man who brought tea to the world. How laughable! That glamour is merely a shroud for a filthy truth. We are always fed the same sweet lie, that Britain brought free trade and global prosperity. But the truth is far more bitter. The British didn't just steal tea. They executed the most ruthless competitor liquidation campaign in history. The moment tea began to flourish in Darjeeling and Assam, the East India Company no longer had a use for China. And what did they do? They crashed the market. With absolute control over everything, from cultivation to shipping, Indian tea flooded the world at dirt-cheap prices. The result? The Qing economy, built on the backbone of tea exports, went into a freefall. Chinese farmers, once proud of their ancient craft, were pushed to the brink of ruin. A 2,000-year monopoly evaporated in just a few decades. And don't forget the opium. To keep the cash flowing while waiting for Indian tea to mature, the British pumped opium into China on an unprecedented scale. They shattered the health and the will of a nation just to fuel their own morning habit. An opium pipe in one hand, a teacup in the other. That was the true face of free trade. China didn't just lose a plant, they lost their position as the center of the world. The collapse of the tea industry triggered the collapse of a dynasty. China entered the century of humiliation, a period of agony whose scars remain deeply etched in their national psyche to this day. And Robert Fortune? He retired with deep pockets and absolute silence regarding the tea masters he took with him. They vanished from history, like tools discarded, once they had outlived their usefulness. This wasn't the progress of mankind. This was the cold brutality of an underground power system, where humans and nature are nothing more than entries on a balance sheet. Robert Fortune has long been resting in his grave, but his ghost, it's haunting every boardroom in Silicon Valley and every skyscraper in Washington and Beijing. Today, we call it intellectual property. In 1848, they called it botany. Same greed, same mechanism. Only the packaging has changed. Look at the semiconductor wars of today, the AI patent lawsuits, the panic when a single nation holds a monopoly over rare earth minerals. There is nothing new here. The blueprint for every modern tech heist was written in black ink on the tea hills of Wuyishan nearly 2 centuries ago. The underground power doesn't care about the names of countries on a map. It only cares about monopoly. If you can't create it, steal it. And afterward, rewrite history to cast yourself as the hero of progress. History doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes with a bitter irony. The British stole tea to save their treasury. Today, superpowers steal data to dominate the future. The Wardian cases of the modern era are lines of code and cloud servers, but the objective remains the same: seize the source code of power. So, the next time you take a sip of tea in the morning, don't just taste the tannins of a leaf. Taste the heist. Taste the collapse of an empire. Taste the way this world actually functions. We celebrate the pioneers, yet we often forget they were the greatest thieves of all. And ask yourself one final question. Is there something in your pocket, in your phone, or even in your thoughts that is being planted by a modern-day Robert Fortune without you even realizing it? History never ends. It is simply waiting for a new false identity to start all over again. Don't just taste the tea, taste the robbery, taste the ruin, and ask yourself, what else are they planting in your own backyard while making you believe it's for your own good?